to the last talk of this afternoon. Thanks again, Frédéric. Okay. And so the next speaker is Mr. Alain Bonardi. Alain Bonardi is a senior lecturer in computer science and music creation at the music department of Paris 8 University. He's also a member of the Center of Research in Computer Science and Musical Creation of the Musidance Laboratory. He's an associate researcher at IRCAM in the Music Practice Analysis team. His research topics are the real-time collaborative mobile music, the poetic analysis of music works using technology, the sound synthesis, and the spatialization of sound. His works in the field of mix and electronic music and also his activity as a RIM are part of this research axis. The title of the presentation of Mr. Bonardi will be From the Space of Timbres to the Timbres in the Space, in Synthesis and Computer Music. So thanks a lot. You can start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and welcome to this presentation. Good afternoon to all. I will, let's say, locate this presentation in as Pierre Coupery's yesterday presentation to make a connection of a focus on the importance of space in the construction, perception, and analysis of timbre. And moreover, I would like to say that to attend this presentation and to be able to listen with a good quality to the sounds I will play, you can find these sounds, these 10 sounds, on the website of the conference. When you go to the website of the conference, to my bio and summary of the presentation, you will find the, thanks to Laurent and Xiong, thank you very much, you will find the sounds, so you can play them careful with your own computer and have a good quality sound, because I don't know what the quality will be here using WebEx. So, first of all, I will start with Jean-Claude Risset's famous chapter in the famous book, Le Timbre, Métaphore pour la Composition. This chapter about timbre and sound synthesis that was released in 1991. And the beginning of the article is very interesting. All the article, of course, is very interesting, but he says that music is flow, motion. It is not an abstract form. It only exists through its embodiment in time and sound. And after that, he quotes André Souris, who says, "It is timbre that qualifies silence, that gives rhythm to time, that spreads out the perspectives and finally highlights all the events of the musical discourse." So in a way, Souris is giving a kind of anticipation to what Daniel Mancero tried to show yesterday. But the main focus of the article is that Risset evokes a music based on timbre that would find in computer synthesis an ideal field of expression. And this is his famous quotation: "The musician who is not satisfied with the composition with sounds can consider composing sound itself." And moreover, he uses and he refers to timbre maps to, let's say, timbre, sorry, I lost my paper, timbre spaces. And as Mihail Malt has shown yesterday, there is not one timbre space, one timbre map, but many, several timbre spaces. On the other side, we have to underline the importance of spatialization. And in a very good book, La spatialisation des musiques électroacoustiques, that was released by Laurent and here in the Saint-Étienne University, in the introduction of this book, John Chowning says that he says, I was convinced that the spatial context of sound is as important as the sound itself. And he adds that we listen to the sound, but we can feel its space. So maybe we have here a necessity to enrich timbre approaches by taking space into account. And the previous quotation by Risset could become something like, music is flow motion, it is not an abstract form. It only exists through its embodiment in time, sound, and space. So, our hypothesis in the field, let's say, first hypothesis, in the field of computer music, either synthesis or processes, the analysis and description of timbre should take into account the diffusion space of the sounds and the understanding of their spatialization. Second point, we generally are not listening to timbres designed in mono as a final result in the final work, but that, of course, we could classify these mono timbres in ad hoc spaces, but we are listening to spatial timbres whose rendering depends on a certain space construction. Third point, the musicologist should take into account the whole of these dimensions. And last point, analyzing timbre in electronic music should not only consider the analysis of the resulting sound, but also the analysis of the processes to produce it. And that is what we have seen with the incredible and wonderful work shown by Frédéric Dufeu in the previous presentation with TIAALS. So I will show two short experiments just to take into account this presence of space and this necessity to intricate timbre and space. So a very simple experiment from mono to stereo first. So I start with a simple sound that was composed using a noise generator that is going to 16 bandpass filters, whose central frequency is a multiple of fundamental frequency. And the amplitudes of the 16 filters are periodically varied by randomization. So I named this sound code, it's classical sound code synthesis. And now I hope we can listen to the sound. Can you hear it? So now we are going to process this sound and add a flanger. It's a sinusoidal delay with a rate of 100 Hertz, a depth of 10, a set of 5, feedback of 0.6. And this was processed in a small pure data patch. And this is the result as a mono result, of course. Sorry. The numbers of the sound, sound number 1, number 2, etc. It is to help you to find on the website the original files if you want to listen to them in a good quality. Sorry. How can we, let's say, project this sound from mono to stereo? The result, the flanger result, of course. One approach, for instance, would be to use this sound as a punctual source in ambisonic environment using a map function. And for instance, if I project, you can see we project the sound to the front of the scene, let's say, this puts in a way the mono sound to a stereo space, since after we decode to stereo. Yes, oops, sorry. Interesting, but I think we can go further and we can redesign the flanger process to be in a native stereo flanger, so that we can intricate spatialization and processing. So you can see a second patch, a second pure data patch, that is a stereo flanger, and where we added a second sinusoidal delay, and with a relationship between the two sinusoidal delays using a spread stereo controller. And this spread effect corresponds to a phase difference between the two sinusoidal delays. So let's listen first to the original, to the patch, sorry, and with a spread of 0, which means there is no phase difference between the two sinusoidal delays. So it makes the same sound on the left and on the right. So now I hope WebEx provides some stereo to you, because now I am adding some phase difference, and you should get a stereo effect, I hope, in your ears with the second file, where I added this small value of phase difference between the two parts. And now a third example with a different value. Can you get the stereo effect, or? I hope. So if you don't get it, you can play the sounds on the website, on the conference website to listen to it. And what is interesting, of course, we have a spatialization effect, a creation of stereo space, but we also have, combined with the stereo effect, a timbre modification. So it means both of these aspects are really intricated. Right. Second example is a multi-channel approach, an example of spatial sound synthesis. So this is what I've been using for sound installation in 2018 in the Hôtel Dieu une Tonnerre, and this was an extension of the Bell model by Risset to make it recursive. It's a recursive approach. It means in the Bell model by Risset, we have 11 partials that are computed from F0, not fundamental, but basic frequency, because F0 at itself is not heard in the result. And you see it provides 11 frequencies. And what I've made is to keep the sound, the finals, to make a complex sound but consistent. I just made the process, this calculation recursive, so that each of the 11 frequency can be the basis of computation of 11 new frequencies. So this makes a total of 11 by 11, 121 frequencies at level 2, and if you go further, of course, at level 3, more than 1,000 partials. So, but we stay at level 2, and we will see how this set complex sound can be specialized, and how the relationship between the final timbre and the way we specialize it. So to investigate, this was done in let's say, laboratory, not in the installation itself. To investigate further in these ideas, I created a max whose role is to enable to pre-compute, let's say, the material, the 121 partials, with various settings, and to be able also to map these partials to the layouts of ambisonic. The output is in ambisonic, uses ambisonic components. So we can choose two. You see, the recursive approach is in fact kind of a multiplication of two spectrum, and I can choose two Ricet-Bell models, but I can also choose a Ricet-Bell model to be multiplied by a Schauning model, for instance, and this gives a resulting spectrum with a lot of partials. And I add a randomization of onset dates within a short window, a temporal window. And I wanted to investigate and to understand to see the result of various mappings from these partials to the ambisonic components. So here in the screenshot, you can see the mapping is very simple mapping. You can see it is done every group, it means sub-bell of 11 components is mapped to one layout in the ambisonics. For instance, here we are at order 3 of ambisonics. We have 7 layouts, and first group is mapped to the H0 ambisonic layout. The next two bells, two sub-bells, it means 22 components, 22 partials are mapped to the next ambisonic layout, etc., etc. So we can listen to the result. So now I will just, I will just change the mapping by, let's say, map the first bells to the last ambisonic layout, invert the mapping, just invert the mapping like that, and keep it bell by sub-bell, and the result will be very different. Now, now I'm going to map, to sort the frequencies and map by frequency every partial in this large amount of frequency, to sort them and to distribute them increasingly to the various ambisonic layouts. And the content itself as a source is always the same, but the distribution to the ambisonic mapping, to the ambisonic layouts is different. So let's listen to that. And the fourth proposition is by onset date. It's to distribute partials by onset date increasingly. Okay. I hope you can get some differences between all these sounds, these binaural sounds through WebEx. I don't know what the transmission is like, but I hope you can listen to at least listen to the website, the sound on the website. So for the musicologist, how can we investigate all these connections between timbre and the spatialization? First case is classic approaches with mono sounds to be specialized later. So as a musicologist, we have first to understand the sound synthesis processes, then to understand the spatialization processes. And for both activities, of course, we have to be able to use the composer's tools. And the result is a combination of separate processes, spatialization being a kind of post-production. In this case, timbres are generally considered as punctual sources. And in a way, spatialization should not alter timbre. It should provide the timbre respectfully in a new space. Example of work, and Frédéric already evoked this work before, Anthem 2 by Pierre Boulez. Technically, violin samples, real-time violin processes, for instance, frequency shifters, delays, are sent to the IRCAM SPAT, and this separates the let's say sound synthesis, sound preparation from the spatialization after. The other approach is what I've tried to show here with simple examples, either from mono to stereo or in multi-channel approach. It's when timbre synthesis and spatialization are intricated. So it means we have, as musicologists, to understand the combination of sound synthesis and spatialization processes. It means we have to investigate a common environment to handle these processes. And it means that timbres are considered as spatial. And in a way, this way, spatialization does alter timbre, does transform timbre. An example of work, among many works, of course, I took the example of work by Horacio Vaggione, Consort for Convolved Piano Sounds, and technically, it's all based on multi-channel decorrelation that creates spatial configuration and spatial immersion. As a conclusion, I would say that we have shown that timbre analysis should take into account its spatial construction. And we have shown two examples of intrication of sound synthesis or process with spatialization. More generally, I would add that, let's say, in musicology in general and in science, of course, we tend to, let's say, have analytical approaches, of course, that are very useful, and we have parameterized and analytical approaches in music analysis, for instance, but they should be completed, I think, by more synthetic ones. And this tries to give an example of a synthetic approach. In our case, combining timbre and spatial analysis. And this gives another indication also. We should consider not only frequential approaches in the analysis of timbres as spatial timbres, but also temporal ones, if we consider that space is, first of all, a question of time. Thank you very much, and I'm ready for your questions if you have.
So, thanks a lot, Mr. Bonardi, for this really interesting presentation that open up a reflection about the analysis of timbre in relation to space and time also. So we still have 5 minutes for the question. Yes? Okay, Mr. Stroppa, feel free to switch on the microphone.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question regarding the relationship between timbre and space, because from the way you presented it, the space is a kind of objective reality that places sound in a certain part of the, let's say, volume, the perceived volume, which it could be a concert hall, the loudspeakers, or a binaural decoding. But unless you are listening to a binaural decoding, or a binaural encoded recording, space depends also on where the people sit with respect to the loudspeakers. And therefore, will there then change the music if I sit in the wrong place? I just wonder how sensitive then this analysis will be to the listening place, which is of course very different for every person who sits in a concert hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Yes, I didn't take this into account. I would have liked to be in Saint-Étienne with all of you and diffuse the examples and see in live what happens if you sit there or there. We know that this parameter should be also taken into account where people sit. In the ambisonic model, we have kind of corrections that try to enable to make kind of zones around the sweet spot, but they are kind of artifacts to correct everything. But for the moment, I didn't take into account this the situation of the people in the room, in the listening room. In fact, in the way these binaural files that I had to provide because we are online, they removed the question you asked, but the question is there because, as I said, timbres are prepared by the composers to be listened to during concerts in concert halls. So thank you for the question, but I will think of that for the progression of this research and the next steps. And it's a very good suggestion.
Sorry, if you don't mind, a side question to your reply and a small provocative statement at the end, just to see how you react. The first, the side question is that, of course, you can compose the space into the sound, that is, distribute different parts of the spectrum in different parts of the space, only if you're doing synthesis or heavy processing. I mean, you can maybe record a sound, multi-band filter it, and send each band to a different loudspeaker. But fundamentally, you're in synthesis. So, which means all the music that is not based on detailed spatial control of the spectrum will be hard to specialize in this way. The provocative statement I just want to have to react to you. I have the feeling that bad music in a great space doesn't make the music much better, and good music in a bad space doesn't make the music much worse. So I just wonder, to the aesthetic appreciation of music, how much the space can contribute and to which extent it turns music better than what it is because the space is there. But I mean, this is a kind of provocative statement, so I don't want to, but it's just a question I ask myself as well, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I would like just to say something about the beginning of your provocative question. For instance, in the case of Vajon, what is interesting is the fact that he uses decorrelation or granularization, granular processes that are mapped to layouts, to spatial layouts. It means it decomposes, and other people do that with the ambisonic model, and I've shown that with the synthesis. So it's a decomposition of a process to the various layouts of the spatialization, and not only the result by filtering, by and dividing the spectrum in various zones of frequencies. So I find it interesting also to provide this approach, which is mainly temporal approach, either granular or by small delays, as Vajon does, and being able to have the complexity of design of the electronic parts being linked to the complexity of spatialization design, in fact, and making a correlation between these two spaces of design. And after, for the last part of the question, of your question, I do agree with you that space cannot make music improve its. It can make some illusion by making bad music more immersive, for instance, but no chance to make it, transform it to good music.
Thank you very much for
you
taking the time to reply.
I don't know if he wants to say something.
Evokes Annette van der Garner. Okay. Wrote some music for spatialization, for example.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I could have quoted examples from her pieces, but I wanted to take, in fact, the I don't know. Maybe she has pieces designed for ambisonic systems, so I'm not sure. Maybe among you, someone could tell me that. But I wanted to take examples using ambisonic approaches as a construction of space, in fact. So as I knew better, either synthesis, as I do, or Vajon's approach, I didn't mention her work. But if you have ideas about specific work we could evoke in his work, and
I mean, as far as I am aware, but maybe PA would reply more accurately than I'm trying to do here. But Annette van der Garn does not work with ambisonics at all. I mean, she's got more of a kind of alpesmonium approach. Am I right, PA? I mean, for the works I know, at least I'm positive, but I'm not aware of her working in a kind of sound field approach, but I may be wrong. I mean, actually, to just react to Marco Stropa's remark, I think that it's important to acknowledge that there is a quite impressive variety of degrees of integration of spatialization in the compositional process amongst, of course, contemporary composers. So while I feel totally, in fact, sympathetic to Marco's comment from a personal perspective, but I'm not really a composer. I mean, I know that this statement would be yes. Pierre mentions Natasha Barrett here. Natasha Barrett, of course, such a statement does not stand really for her. I think Hans Tuchku as well would be worth considering regarding this. And it's a quite fascinating. I mean, it's a quite fascinating parameter because indeed. the relationship with timbre and space is sort of obvious for us human beings. I mean, in fact, animals, but compositionally speaking, it's not so obvious. In fact, as far as I can tell from a sort of outsider's perspective.
And I can say, for instance, in the simple process of decorrelation, which means having an original source and multiple very short delays, and having them decomposed one short delay by ambisonic layout. And what is very interesting is mapping of controls. You have global controls to control the phenomenon for the composer, of course, and to find the distribution of these global values on the, let's say, for instance, if we have 7 layouts, as I've shown before, how we distribute, let's say, the global control values of the whole phenomenon to each layout. And you have various strategies. You have linear strategies, you have logarithmic strategies, etc. But each strategy of distribution and mapping on the various layouts of the same, in fact, it's the same process that is instantiated with slightly different values on each ambisonic layout, is very, very rich, because if you change the distribution, you change the timbre and you change the spatialization, both of them simultaneously.